Hello my friends, welcome to the channel. I am Nicole and I live here in India, and today I'm going to watch a video from ThinkSchool. Now I really like his content, well researched, well put together, and this one is Iran violates ceasefire. They did. Why Russia and China won't let Iran fail. It's a geopolitical case study. If you haven't already, watch it with me. Yeah? Give me your like, give me your subscribe, and let's go.
Ladies and gentlemen, Iran is under attack, and this time Russia and China are angry.
Какая будет ваша реакция и реакция России и ваши первые действия?
Я даже обсуждать такой возможности не желаю.
美国袭击伊朗核设施，严重违反联合国宪章宗旨和原则，加剧中东紧张局势。
While most people think America is just flexing its muscles again, what they don't see is that this time the US is not facing one weak nation. It's poking two angry superpowers at the same time. Why? Because this isn't just about nuclear weapons anymore. America and Israel are openly trying to dethrone Iran's supreme leader, and they are trying to replace him with a Western puppet just like they've done before. And history is witness to its actions.
The regime change.
US President Donald Trump has mentioned the possibility of regime change in Iran.
The Israeli Prime Minister was planning an assassination of the supreme leader.
Attacked in the dead of night. These pictures from Isfahan of the US assault on Iranian nuclear sites.
Order we received from our commander-in-chief was focused, it was powerful, and it was clear. We devastated the Iranian nuclear program.
Every time a leader stood up to the West, America has dethroned that leader and installed a Western puppet to favor their own requirements. They did it in Iran to remove their prime minister to protect their oil. They did it in Chile to overthrow President Salvador to protect American copper mines. And in Guatemala, America launched a military coup just to protect the lands of an American banana company.
Operation TD's success, the U.S. sent the military into Guatemala
to overthrow the government that is threatening American interests in the region.
These conflicts also took on an international dimension when U.S. geopolitical and business interests got involved, as they often did.
So if America can go to war for a banana, they'll absolutely go to war for a nuclear bomb. But this time, Russia and China might enter the fight. So the question is, what the hell is happening after the US attack on Iran? Why is Iran so important for Russia and China? And could this war escalate to a full-fledged world war? Let's start with the first question. Why is Iran so important for Russia and China? On 22nd June 2025, the US Air Force launched a strike on Iran's nuclear sites.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the three key nuclear facilities. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror.
And this attack has pushed the world to the edge again, because now even Iran has hit back at Israel. But this isn't just about missiles anymore. Reports say that US and Israel are now planning to overthrow Iran's regime. And if that happens, the world fears something much bigger. Russia and China might enter the war. Why? Because Iran isn't just another country, guys. It is one of the most important allies for both Russia and China. And there are three powerful reasons why Russia and China will not let Iran fall. Well, if you remember, before the Russia-Ukraine conflict, over 40% of the European Union's natural gas imports came from Russia. This gas primarily came through Nord Stream 1, Yamal Europe, and Turk Stream pipelines. And if you look at the map, Nord Stream 1 runs under the Baltic Sea, connecting Russia and Germany. Then the Yamal Europe pipeline transports natural gas from Russia to Europe via Belarus and Poland. And the Turk Stream natural gas pipeline runs from Russia to Turkey under the Black Sea. This pipeline has two lines, one that supplies Turkey and the other that extends to southeastern and central Europe. And Russia used this heavy dependency to cut off oil as soon as Europe imposed sanctions. Long story short, Russia cut oil supply by 80%, it caused a global oil shortage, and the oil prices started shooting up. And if you remember, this gave Russia such high leverage that Russia actually made more money after the sanctions than before the sanctions. Look at this. Even after all the sanctions and big EU speeches, by June 2024, Europe still paid 8.7 billion euros to Russia for gas. And even as of January 2025, Russia is still making 231 million euros every single day.
Vladimir Putin is able to prop up his economy despite those sanctions.
Russia continues to make a lot of money from its energy exports.
Over a decade of sanctions have not worked.
Russia's economy has weathered the war and sanctions much better than many Western analysts forecast.
But now, if America places an American puppet as the Iranian ruler, then Russia will lose this power. Why? Because Iran holds the second largest natural gas reserves in the world with 34 trillion cubic meters of oil, which is roughly 16% of all global reserves. But because of sanctions on Iran, Iran only has pipelines in Iraq, Turkey and Armenia. No pipeline currently reaches Europe directly. But after the regime change, the West may fund and initiate a pipeline from Iran to all the way to Europe. In fact, over the decades, Iran has already built a web of IGAT pipelines or Iran Gas Trunk Lines. This pipeline proposes to move gas from Khuzestan to Elam to Kurdistan to Bazargan. This pipeline was designed to send gas to Turkey and from there into Europe via Turkey's existing gas grid. In fact, there was also a Persian pipeline which was proposed to extend IG-89 into Turkey. And from Turkey, it was further planned to expand to Greece, Italy and via branches to Austria, Germany, France and eventually Spain. These routes are currently blocked by sanctions. But if Iran's regime falls and a pro-Western leader comes to power, then there is a very high possibility that these routes will be activated. This will take a few years, but once they're activated, Russia will lose its billion-dollar oil leverage over Europe. Similarly, when it comes to China, China is currently the largest buyer of Iranian oil. In fact, as of 2025, China imports around 90%, I repeat, 90% of Iran's total oil exports. And several independent reports even suggest that a significant portion of these transactions happen in yuan and not the US dollar. So if you see, this marks a strategic shift in the global energy trade, and this is China's effort to internationalize the yuan. And it also creates a rare opportunity for Beijing to reduce the reliance on the US dollar and build a parallel energy payment ecosystem. However, if Iran's political leadership were to shift significantly towards the Western aligned policies, this arrangement could be disrupted under the new governance. In such a scenario, China may lose preferential access and the United States and its allies could regain dominant influence over Iranian energy exports, both in terms of pricing and currency denomination. This is the first reason why China and Russia will go to great lengths, even get aggressive, if America tries to dethrone Iran's leadership. The second reason is China's greatest nightmare. China's nightmare is a tiny maritime passageway called the Strait of Malacca.
This waterway is really, really important. It fuels nations, and it could be this global superpower's biggest weakness. This is the Malacca Strait. But for countries like China, its importance goes even further. It receives 80% of its oil through here. This means it relies on tankers successfully bringing oil from the Middle East through the Malacca Strait to keep its economy going.
This narrow sea lane lies between Indonesia, Malaysia and Singapore. And right now, 80% of China's entire trade passes through the Strait of Malacca. So if America blocks this trade, it can strangle the Chinese economy and block oil from going to China during wartime. So to end this nightmare, China has initiated a monumental project called the Belt and Road Initiative. And in this initiative, Iran is emerging as the most critical player. To address the Malacca Strait vulnerability, China has designed a direct land route which goes from Xinjiang to Central Asia to Iran to then Turkey and eventually the entire Europe. If this route is built, then oil and trade can directly happen between Europe and China, and oil can easily go from Iran to China. And China is so serious about this route that China has already invested $1.3 trillion into the Belt and Road Initiative. And Iran, if you look at the map, is at the heart of this $1 trillion project. Why? Because Iran acts as the bridge directly linking China to Europe. And without Iran, China's strategic land route will completely collapse. In fact, this is just the beginning. This overland route can actually slash China's shipping time from 40 days by sea to just 15 to 20 days by land. So faster delivery means Chinese goods will hit the European markets quicker, cheaper and more competitively. So this isn't just a backup plan, it's a shield for China's oil security and a weapon for its trade dominance. So if Iran collapses, China's $1 trillion Belt and Road investment goes down the drain. And what's even worse is that China could once again fall under the mercy of the American global chokehold. This is China's biggest nightmare. And this brings us to the third reason. If Iran falls, Russia will lose its southern firewall. In simple words, Russia sees Iran as a strategic shield, its first line of defense against NATO and the US military influence from the south. Why? Look at this. Iran sits at the crossroads of three strategic zones. Iraq, which is now home to US military bases, Syria, which is now going pro-West, and then we have the Persian Gulf with US naval dominance via bases in Bahrain, Qatar and Kuwait. So if Iran collapses or goes pro-America, America will gain a direct gateway to southern Russia, the Caspian Sea and the underbelly of Central Asia where Russia wants uncontested influence. And Russia is so serious about the shield that Russia and Iran have conducted 5,000 military drills, arms transfers and even intel exchanges. In fact, Iran even lets Russian warships and supply vessels dock and resupply at its ports. So if Iran goes pro-US, Russia will lose this logistics hub and the American naval presence could enter the Caspian or Arabian Sea near the Russian turf. And I don't think Putin is going to like it. And the last reason for Russia to be worried is military hardware synergy. You see, Russia has sold Iran S-300 air defense systems to shield its nuclear sites. They also share drone tech, missile defense and cyber warfare tools, and Iran even supplied drones to Russia during the Russia-Ukraine war. In fact, Russia has been using the Iranian Shahid 136 drones to attack Ukrainian territories. These cheap drones save Russia a fortune on airstrikes which would otherwise require millions of dollars worth of missiles. So if Iran falls, no more cheap drones for Russia, no more swarm attacks, their surveillance will break down and Russia's cost per strike will shoot up from thousands of dollars to millions of dollars. So for Russia, Iran isn't just an ally, it's a shield. And if that shield breaks, NATO walks right through. This is the reason why a regime change in Tehran won't just cost Russia billions, it will also leave their military, economy and power wide open for attack. So for Kremlin, letting Iran fall is not a risk, it's a red line. That is why Moscow will protect Tehran even if it means going to war. And lastly, for the Middle East, if a pro-Western regime takes over Tehran, Hezbollah will lose its funding, the Houthis will lose their funding, and Iraq's Shia militia will break apart. And the result could be sectarian civil wars, mass protests, regional destabilization, and possibly a second Arab Spring that might haunt the world for the next 2 decades. So what are Russia and China expected to do? Well, we don't know that yet, because this could range anywhere from a peaceful veto at the United Nations all the way to using weapons to protect Iran with a full-fledged war. And if this escalates into a full-blown war, it won't just be Iran that bleeds. Oil prices will shoot up, global inflation will rise, interest rates could stay high for years, and economies from India to Europe will suffer, not just militarily, but even at the grocery store. Because we're talking about supply chain collapsing, energy shocks, refugee crisis, and cyber warfare at a scale that is quite unimaginable. And if nukes even enter the conversation, every global power will be forced to choose sides. Now that's not a regional war, that is the perfect recipe for a world war. And what we need to remember is that in every century, humanity writes a few chapters in blood not because we must, but because we refuse to learn. World War I began with a bullet, World War II began with a madman's ego, and a nuclear war might just begin because of a madman's pride. America may hold the world's largest arsenal, Russia may have the most warheads, China may control the supply chain, but the truth is that in a nuclear war, nobody wins, only the innocent bleed. And it all depends on whether humanity will choose pride or peace. And all we can hope for is that this war doesn't escalate. That's all from my side for today, guys. If you learned something valuable, please make sure to hit the like button in order to make YouTube Baba happy. And for more such insightful business and political case studies, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Well, as always, very insightful. I think it's a couple days old, and from what I have heard on the American media is that what Trump said about like completely destroying their nuclear sites was not true. They still have nuclear capacity, whatever it is that they had. Iran came out and said that, you know, nothing had been destroyed. I guess I'm not sure what to believe. I think I'd probably believe Iran at this point. I would hate to see this escalate. Unfortunately, I think our president does have a lot of pride, and I think it will be difficult for him to let it go. However, he does really want a Nobel Peace Prize, so maybe he will step away from the big guns and hold himself back. I don't know what will happen between, you know, Israel and Iran. There's a lot of people dying, and it's just an unfortunate, it's all around not good for everybody. And World War III would be horrible for everyone. So it's a lot to think about and a lot to ponder. You know, I think about during these types of situations that, you know, I might not live to see it. You know, I'm getting old, and, you know, what happens to my kids? You know, what type of world are they inheriting? Are they inheriting a safer place? Are they inheriting something that is truly devastated and ravished by war? Will they even make it that long? All things that we think about, I guess, at a certain age and a certain point in our lives. Anyway, as always, this was great content. I really enjoy watching ThinkSchool. If you enjoy watching it, please give me that like, please give me that subscribe. If you'd like to see something else, please put it in the comments. I would love to hear from you. I read the comments. I sometimes respond. So, as always, I love you, and bye-bye.